Hey guys, I want to talk about something that made a huge difference in my paintings. You can see here's a painting that I started a few years ago, never finished, and this little one I finished just a few months ago and it just needs a signature. But you can see just how much brighter this one is. But making brighter paintings is not as easy as it sounds. This is something that I've been struggling with for years, and I would keep telling myself that this time it'd be different, but I kept falling back into the same pitfalls. So I want to share what I've learned through that struggle to help you make brighter, more luminous paintings. And we'll be working on the palette for most of this video where color and value decisions are made. My name is Daniel Folta. I'm an oil painter and painting coach. All right, now I've just moved my camera around so that you can see the palette as I see it. So I'm going to be sitting kind of awkwardly, but I really want you to see what I'm seeing. Okay, so when I'm mixing my paint, I start with a base string of values. And because I, like many of you, were taught to paint shadows first, that's what I would start with. Now the shadow needs to be darker and less colorful than the lights. So I would usually take a red and a blue and mix them together, leaning towards red to make a brown shadow value. And it's not very gray, it still has a lot of color. I could even add a little more for good measure. And it's also not very dark. If we compare this to black, it's still a pretty bright value. And then when I get to my base light, I would want to make sure that my color is brighter and richer than the shadow. I could even add a little green to let this move towards yellow a little bit more, just trying to brighten the value without losing too much color. And I'm avoiding white because in subtractive color mixing, which is what we're doing here, the white would take some of the richness of the color away. So I'm gravitating to this pale yellow color to retain some of the color while also increasing the value. And this is feeling really nice. It's not too far away from the shadow, so these are going to blend together quite nicely. And it feels nice and colorful. Maybe I can get away with a little bit of red just to really amp this up. And then to mix my other shades, I can start with this and go up in value. And I want to make sure that there are clear value jumps between these colors. If I jump too far ahead, then these colors won't blend in as well. And I'll mix one more for my highlights, and I'll add some white to this one. And I'd be happy with that. I've got these nice rich colors, these nice value jumps in between. Everything is looking good. But when I take these colors and put them on the painting, it somehow looks dark. I followed all of the principles. What did I do wrong? I used nice rich colors. I didn't add any white until the very end. It's very colorful. The shadow isn't too bright. But take a look at this. If I compare the highlight I just mixed to white, look at the jump in value between those two things. Look at how dark this is compared to white. Before I was comparing all these value relationships to each other with these nice jumps in between, but I lost sight of how bright I actually could have gone if I had mapped this out in a different way. So my first piece of advice is to mix the base light shade first. That way we're not thinking about creating something that's dark and colorless. We're thinking about creating something that's bright and colorful. And I could start with this color again, but it's really quite dark compared to white, which is the next thing. We don't want to compare it to black and convince ourselves that it's bright enough. We want to compare it to white so that we're pushing the limits of what we can make bright and colorful at the same time. How bright can I get without making it devoid of color? That's a much better question to ask than, is this color colorful compared to gray or black, or even compared to its shadow? So rather than start with this, which I could start with, I'm going to choose not to. I'm going to choose this because it's a brighter value. And I'll still add some blue because we don't want to use fire engine red, and I'll use some green. So we'll start there with the goal of having a bright and colorful light. And actually that was getting too purple. I think I added too much blue. It's worth starting over if it's going to take too much of another color to overpower what I already had. So I'm going to come back to my red and I'll skip blue to start with this green. This blue is going to strip color away. So I'm going to be more reserved about jumping into it. So now I've got a very rich color here. It needs to go brighter in value. I could use this, but I'm afraid that it would just get too far away from what a typical flesh tone would look like. So I'm going to use this one instead. I'll start with just a little bit, and it's not going to take away as much color as what white would. This is leaning a little red, so I'm going to add some more green, which is making this a little bit darker. So I think I'll have to use all of this to push this up in value. And I'm thinking I might be able to get away with a little bit of yellow now. This is still leaning red compared to these other hues, so we'll give that a try. And so this is looking both more colorful and brighter than this one. It's kind of in between these two right now. I can compare this against white, and it's still quite dark. It's very bright against black. And the white and black, they're very far away from each other, so it is a little bit hard to tell. And so What I will also use is the value of my palette. If you think about the value of this palette, look at how dark the palette is compared to the white. That's actually pretty dark. You might be matching your colors to the reference that you have, but if you forget to take into account the space that your painting will live in, the colors of these walls are a pastel kind of green. They're not even white. And if I hold up this palette paper against that wall, you can see how dark the value of the palette paper is. So if the majority of your painting is darker than the color of your palette, then on most walls, your painting could appear to be very dark. That's one of the big differences between these two paintings. The lights on here are still darker than the color of the wall, but the lights in here are brighter than the color of the wall, which is allowing them to really pop out. So if we could have the majority of our light shades brighter than the value of the palette, then that would guarantee a brighter painting. So depending on, what painting I'm doing, this could be acceptable, but just to really push this, let's keep adding this color. And this yellow is only a little bit brighter than the palette, so we will probably have to add some white in. Let's see what this gives us. Now we've got a value that's still darker than the palette, but still very colorful. It's more colorful than this one over here. And if this is my darkest light, then I could use a value like this for my shadow. So it was because I was comparing the relationship of this to the palette and to white that I was able to get a color that is very bright and very colorful. And I still have so much room to go between these shades. From here, I can go both up and down in value. And I do like to start with my base shadow shade before I get into my other light shades. Now this shadow only needs to be darker and more gray relative to the lights, and this could be my darkest light. So I actually don't need to make this very dark. It just needs to be darker. So this is where I might add some of that blue. It'll help cool this down a little bit. You can see the value is changing significantly actually, but the value of this is still pretty much the same value as what was originally our light value. And this being as gray as it is could help this feel a lot more colorful, but we could probably get away with getting a little bit more color in here too for a more colorful painting overall. And it is still darker and less colorful than my light. And look at the room that I have to go. I can still get so much darker with my shadows. I have so much room to work and create form. So once I have both of these mixed and I can capture the overall impression with just these two colors, I would then go up in value. But rather than take small steps, I could decide to set aside some white, knowing that that's the brightest value I can possibly get. And if I want to knock it down just a little bit, I could then take a very small amount of this and add it in. So now we have an off-white and it's so much brighter than over here. And so I know that the colors that I mix are going to have to bridge this gap. That helps me set my parameters. I found the darkest light and my brightest highlight, and then I can find everything in between. So mix your base light shade first, and then base your colors off of that. Also, compare the color to white, not black, and compare the color to the color of your palette, which you can then use as an in-between reference point to gauge how bright or dark you want your painting to be. The next piece of advice is that value trumps color in most cases. It's very easy to be too afraid to use these colors when you know that they are taking saturation out. But if you look at all these colors up here, these highly saturated colors, they're actually quite dark. Very dark compared to the palette paper. And these two are probably my most saturated colors, and look at how dark they are. So if you focus too much on trying to have the highest saturation, you're going to end up with these darker values. And of course, that's not to say that these values won't work for a painting. They absolutely could. I'm just illustrating how there might be an opportunity to go brighter while maintaining the same impression of colorfulness. And there are times when a more vivid color can actually appear to be a brighter value, but if you ever find yourself having to decide between one or the other, generally values will have a better impact on the overall relationships in your painting, especially for creating something that is believable and has form. Also, it is better for your painting to be too bright than too dark. You can always darken a painting by glazing in transparent paints. But if you want to make an area brighter, then you have to paint over it with opaques, which is a lot more work. So don't be afraid to sacrifice a little color to get the value right, especially if you're learning. Another thing that you may have noticed in the difference between these two is that for this one, when I was focused on getting that shadow color, I felt like it was okay to use this red with this blue. And then when I use my light shade, it made sense to go back to this, since I used a lot of this in there, and build it up with Naples yellow, with this red, and I think this green. Whereas for this one, I didn't use this color at all. Not only is it dark, but it's also not as rich in color as this one. And so by starting here, and even adding some yellow, I'm staying with colors that are very saturated, but also very bright in their value. Now here is the palette that I used to make the tiny painting behind my shoulder. And I had started by mixing this value here, which I thought was going to be my darkest light, my base light. And so I mixed a shadow for that. I'd gotten so much tunnel vision comparing these two colors together, trying to make this very subtle shift so that they would blend really easily together. But then when I created a highlight value like this one, I realized that this could be my shadow and this could be my light, right? Technically, this is more colorful and brighter than this one, so this could function as a shadow. So the advice here is that when you're done mixing all of your colors for your palette, reassess. Take another look and see if you can push the colors or the values in a better direction. So you mix all your colors and then you reassess, make any tweaks as necessary. But once you start painting, don't second guess your palette decisions until you've blocked everything in. When these colors go onto a white canvas or a black canvas or whatever it is, the context is going to change. But you will refine the context again once everything is laid in together. And then when you assess, step back from your work. When you're up close to your painting, you're only comparing the subtle relationships within your field of vision. But when you step back, you get to see the painting in the context of its environment. You can look at another white object in the room or a black object in the room and compare your painting to that to see how it would fit inside of a space. Another thing that I've been doing a lot more to preserve the brightness and the colorfulness of my paintings is to use individual brushes for individual shades. Because even if you're cleaning your brushes with a paper towel, they're still going to have some contamination. That can be a little overkill if you have a lot of shades going on. So usually I'll kind of keep a few brushes for specific areas, like these three might go for one brush, these two might be for another brush, and then I'd be okay with a brush for all three of these shadows. So just organizing your brushes that way can really help with that. And then my last piece of advice is to use a reference from a digital screen. You can see just how much brighter this is than the two paintings behind me because this is light that is shining in to the camera, into your eyes, whereas there's not actual light shining out of these paintings. Now, if you're learning, I highly recommend that you do not use reference from your digital screens, that you actually print something out on good quality photo paper. And I can make a whole video explaining why that is so important. So let me know if you want me to make that video explaining that. But if you're already making solid paintings and you want them to be more luminous, you can challenge yourself by trying to mix colors that don't shine light, comparing them to colors that are shining light at you. And so that's going to force your hand to be more colorful and brighter as much as you can. It can get very frustrating though because you will never be able to quite achieve the colors that a digital screen can. All that being said, for as challenging as it's been, I found that it has pushed my limits into making brighter paintings than I thought were possible. So yeah, that's about it. This has been a different format for me. You know, it's been a lot easier to jump on Procreate through my iPad and talk about some of the decision-making aspects of painting, but hopefully coming back into my favorite oil painting, traditional painting, which is really where my comfort zone is. I'm not experienced in digital painting at all. So this has been a bit new of a format for me video-wise, but it's also my comfort zone. So let me know if you'd like to see more videos like this where I'm talking about traditional painting, color mixing, things that are done with oil paint specifically, and that'd be a good indication for me of what to be focusing on for all of you out there learning from all over the world. If you want to see more of my paintings, you can go to my website. I'm selling prints and commissions, working on some fun projects that I hope to share more with you soon. And I'm also coaching, so if you're interested in getting more one-to-one hands-on training from me, then you can start by submitting your art for a free critique. And through that, you can indicate whether you want that to be seen on YouTube by other people or if you just want it to be kept between us. Either way is fine. Obviously, getting to do these videos and publishing them on YouTube is a great benefit to everyone. But this has been fun. Hopefully you learned a few things from this video, and I'll sign off now. Thank you everyone. Have a beautiful day.